Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Maraming salamat po sa inyong oras at sa pagpapaunlak sa paanyaya ng Kaagapay Teacher Support para sa ating webinar entitled Retooling for Distance Learning. I'm RJ and today I'll be sharing my insights and experiences in teaching secondary social studies in an online distance learning modality. But before I move further with my presentation today, let me first formally introduce myself. So I am Rodolfo Maramag Jr., but you can call me RJ, and I am a world history and contemporary issues teacher from Xavier School. That's why most of my most of the insights and experiences that I will share with you today will be coming from my own experience in Xavier School. I am currently writing my thesis for my master's in UP in Social Studies Education, and I am studying about argumentation in contemporary issues, in controversial issues to be specific. And I'm also a graduate of BSc Social Science from PNU. So I guess I have fellow PNUans here watching right now. So kamusta po kayong lahat? Actually, gusto ko po kayong kamustahin. Kamusta na po ang pagtuturo ninyo ng Araling Panlipunan? Sana po ay okay lang po kayo at ang inyong po mga mag-aaral. At muli, gusto ko po magpasalamat sa Kaagapay sa pagbibigay sa atin ng ganitong klaseng oportunidad para makapagbahagi ng aming mga karanasan at mga natutunan namin mula dito. And we're hoping that you will learn a thing or two from this sharing. Okay. So now let me start with this essential question. Perhaps a lot of us are wondering, how can we deliver instruction in social studies efficiently and effectively in this time of pandemic, especially when the government declared that classes will start later than usual because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and it actually disrupted our usual school year schedule or routines. And we really have to think of effective ways, efficient ways on how we can deliver instruction in social studies. So my presentation would actually revolve around this essential question. Okay, but before I move along with my presentation, let me present first the objectives and the flow of my presentation this morning. Okay, so we will start with insights. And these insights was actually called from our experiences so far in teaching secondary social studies in an ODL setup. And this from these insights, we will identify and discuss the challenges that we encountered, and hopefully we will be able to realize something valuable ways, for example, on how you can adapt the things that we are doing in Xavier School, the points that I will mention in my presentation in your own context. Okay, because I know that different schools would have different ways in delivering distance learning. Okay, so hopefully whatever sharing I will have for this day will be able to adapt it in your own context in your respective schools. Okay, first of all, let me ask you teachers, how did you prepare for distance learning? What kind of preparations did you make? Okay, so there are actually several modalities in delivering distance learning. One is through modules, the so-called modular distance learning, wherein we provide our students with printed modules, and the students will accomplish them, and there's a particular schedule where they have to submit, and then you will give feedback about their work or about their performance in the activities included in your modules. Another modality is what we call BDL, or broadcast distance learning, wherein our students would rely on TV channels and radio stations dedicated for educational programs or shows in lieu of the usual face-to-face instruction. And then lastly, and this is something that we are doing in Xavier School, is what we call online distance learning. This kind of modality relies so much in the use of internet and online resources. So basically, we have a combination of synchronous and asynchronous tasks. But since after conducting survey among our clientele, our students and parents, and finding out that most of them have access to internet and online resources, then we proceeded with online distance learning. And if I may also share, for quite some time, Xavier School has already been integrating technology in all aspects of education in our school. That's why online learning is not new in our case. Okay, so let me just show you the process that we've gone through in transitioning to ODL, because this might give us some important points that we can incorporate as we prepare learning plans or as we design activities or modules in your respective schools. First, we started by revisiting the curriculum. And I know that in public schools, you also did this, okay? Because basically, we cannot teach the same scope of content that we implemented in the previous school years with what we have right now. Because since we are in different circumstance, the pandemic, the quarantine affected our schedule. We really have to select and identify the most essential content and skills that we should target in our subject. Di ba palagi po nating problema sa araling panlipunan, napakarami nating dapat ituro dahil multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary ang subject natin. Hindi lang tayo nagtuturo ng kasaysayan, nagtuturo din tayo ng mga konsepto sa political science, anthropology, sociology, tungkol sa kultura, tungkol sa environment at sa ekonomiya. So lahat ng yun actually sama-sama sa araling panlipunan. Pero alin lang doon yung pinaka-importante nating ituro sa pagkakataong ito. And that's what we did with the first time that we met after the quarantine. Okay? And then after that, we had a training on adaptive design learning. All of us back in college would have a course on educational technology. That's why we're not completely clueless of what online teaching is all about. However, since not all of us would incorporate or use online teaching as approach in delivering instruction, then it's better to have a refresher course about this. And then whatever new things that we have learned from this training, merge it with what we know so that we can design our courses properly and more efficiently and effectively for our students. In our case, we had a training in what we call adaptive design learning, so that whatever module or learning plan that we'll prepare, it can be used by students with different contexts, meaning students that has access that have access to internet, and those students that doesn't have access to the internet. Okay. And then after that, we proceed in selecting the best LMS or learning management system. Actually, this is an important part of preparing for distance learning, because how will you give out modules or how will you give out activities to your students? Through what? Through what platform? So it's very important that we select the best LMS based on its features. There are several LMS available. Different publishing companies actually offer LMS with different features. Okay, but what's important is that after selecting the LMS, you must also learn on how to maximize or use its features in designing our courses. And then upon doing that, that's only when we started designing our module. Okay, and then once we designed our module, we cannot claim that there's a particular module that we can create perfectly in this kind of situation. Okay, so because we are like in a trial and error mode, we're still in a trial and error mode, because we're still exploring the activities or the features that will work for our students and those that will not work for them. Okay, that is why evaluating them is very important. It's important that we always receive feedback from our students about their use of our module or in accomplishing the activities, and also feedback from our fellow teachers, so we'll be able to improve our work. We'll be able to identify the things that works for them and those that didn't work for them. Okay, so that's how we transition. Now this is our context in Xavier School. Okay, we call our program as Xavier School e-learning. And we use, like I said, ODL as our modality in delivering distance learning. And we selected Schoology as our primary LMS for Xavier. Actually, prior to this school year, we have already been using Google Classroom as our LMS. But since upon the presentation of the Schoology team, and I mean, yes, after the presentation and upon knowing all its features, we found out that Schoology has better features than Google Classroom in this kind of setup. Although Google Classroom is also good, and most of us are well trained and are well versed in using Google Classroom. But Schoology also has different features to offer that we can maximize in preparing our modules for distance learning. And then in terms of learning time, we can no longer follow the usual schedule that we have in a regular school year. What we did, we allotted 100 minutes per week per subject. That means we only meet our students synchronously one time per week. Okay, but we do not use that 100-minute period for synchronous session alone. That 100-minute period is a combination of synchronous and asynchronous tasks. Okay, so the pointer is whatever learning time we were assigned with, we should maximize that for the learning of our students. Make sure that there is something valuable happening in the discussion. There's something there's a significant output that our students will be able to accomplish in each session. So that's our context. And this is what Schoology looks like in its actual website. Schoology is actually based in the social media platform Facebook. That's why, as you can see, aesthetically, it's similar with Facebook, especially its functions, its friendly user. In this side, in the left side, you will see here the different tabs. There's a materials tab where we can post all the folders, all the materials that our students would use in our class. This is also where we post the link to our Zoom, Zoom meetings. We actually use Zoom because Zoom for us has more teacher-friendly features than Google Meet. Okay, but you can feel free to use other platforms that works for you. And then there's an updates tab where we can post our announcement. Just like in Facebook, di ba, we post status in Facebook. So updates tab works like that. Okay, we can post announcements or reminders about the outputs of our students so they can keep track. And each subject would have a course like this in Schoology para hindi halo-halo. Actually, you can also do this in Facebook. Let's say you're not using Google Classroom. In Google Classroom kasi, you can create a Google Classroom for a particular subject, just like this. Sa Facebook naman, you can utilize that by creating a group page for a particular subject then. So once you created that, then it will already work just like this platform. But what I appreciate in Schoology is that it included calendar features in its system. That's why both teachers and students can keep track of the assessments. For students, what to submit. For teachers, what to check. So that we can keep track of it and we will not get lost with the schedule. Okay. So this is what Schoology looks like for us. Now, as we start with my sharing regarding the teaching of secondary social studies, the first question that I'd like to ask you is this: how well do you know your students before teaching them social studies? Do you know their strengths? For example, in history, in world history, in economics, are there weaknesses? I mean, strengths and weaknesses prior to coming to your grade level or to your class? Do you actually exchange feedback with other social studies teachers in other grade levels so you know their profile? That's actually very important because in this kind of setup, context is very important, teachers. It's very important to know and consider the context of our students when preparing a learning plan for social studies. So in Xavier School, what we do, we actually interact. We always conduct a meeting with previous social studies teachers so that we will know what knowledge and skills they have taught the students and their strengths and weaknesses, so that once they come to our grade level, we know what to reinforce, what to somehow reteach or clarify, or what to focus on in our subject so we can maximize the time. So it's very important that we know the context of our students, where they are coming from. And also, it's important to know if whether our students would have access to a particular online resources. For example, internet. It's important to conduct a survey to know how much of our student population would have access to the internet so that we can adjust our modules. We can prepare flexible learning plans for them. That's how important context is, teachers. So that's a very important insight. Now, the challenge for us is how we can make our learning plan flexible, because I understand yung isang learning plan pala ang hirap ng minsang i-prepare. What more pa na kailangan pa nating mag-prepare para magagamit siya ng mga estudyante natin na may internet man o wala, para mas maging flexible. So it's very important that when we design um, our modules, okay lang yon, we design it na kung ano lang muna yung alam natin based sa naging training natin. Pero once we're done implementing them, these modules, we should solicit feedback from our students so that we will have a basis on how to improve them. Itanong natin sa kanila kung ano yung mga activities o yung mga features ng modules natin na nag-work for them, na naging madali para sa kanila na sagutan o gawin. And then, itanong din natin kung ano yung mga nahirapan sila at yung mga bagay doon or parts doon that seem unessential for them. So these informations are very important for us to improve our learning plan. Okay? So it's a working output actually, no? So wala pang masasabi natin na perfect kaagad. So importante na kailangan yung attitude natin towards our students, yung approach natin sa kanila ay mas maging open tayo so that we will know their feedback and use that as basis in improving our learning plans. So that's one. Next, when you're already designing your modules, what tools or apps do you use in teaching social studies? How do you select them? Perhaps this is one of the frequently asked questions in social studies, because actually there are a lot of websites, there are a lot of tools, and they have several functions. Okay. Now it all boils down to the quality of technology integration that we do in our subject. Okay. Technology integration, if I may just clarify, fellow teachers, is different from technology use. Because when we say technology use, it's simply using a particular gadget or using the internet to be able to accomplish a particular task in our subject. But when we talk of technology integration, it's all about utilizing our technological resources to create learning opportunities that will develop important skills such as research skills, creative thinking skills, and reflective thinking skills in social studies. Okay, that's how we must use technology in our class, not simply letting our students work on their output using their cell phones or their computer. Kailangan may skills sila na natututunan mula doon sa paggamit nila ng technology, ng app na na-recommend natin or sinabi natin na gamitin nila. Okay. Now, in Xavier School, what we do is that our students actually, prior to COVID, they were required to have an iPad para pare-pareho sila ng gadget na ginagamit. Para pare-pareho sila ng nakikitang features at alam din namin teachers kung ano yung interface ng gadget na meron sila. And we use, like I said, Schoology as our LMS. And since in our case, all of us, both students, teachers, actually all staff, including non-teaching staff in our school, would have a Gmail account. We utilize G Suite tools in designing our modules. So, madalas po kami gumamit ng Google Docs, kung familiar po kayo doon, or Google Slides, spreadsheets, lahat po ng available sa G Suite tools ay na-explore po namin para ma-maximize po namin siya sa social studies class namin. But based from the work of Almario and Austria in 10 to 20, there are actually, aside from Google Suite tools or G Suite tools, there are actually a lot of tools available that we can use in our subject. There are several, but I only selected these tools based on their function that I think we can work, in my opinion, can work or will work in our subject. First, in terms of productivity tools. For example, gusto nating magpagawa sa kanila ng worksheet sa history. Meron tayong event na pinapaprocess sa kanila or case sa economics or pwedeng issue sa grade 10. So pwede tayong gumawa ng worksheets using MS Word kung ang gamit natin ay Windows. Kung available naman natin na gadget ay Mac, you can use Pages. If wala namang Mac, regardless kung kung Windows ba or Mac yung gamit natin, for as long as may Google account at may internet ka, then you can use Google Docs because it's part of G Suite tools. So we can use them, word processing. Now for presentation, we can still allow our students present data or information and analyze them during video conference like this. And we can use PowerPoint, Keynote, and Google Slides. Actually, ang pinaka-effective in my experience is Google Slides. Kasi Google Slides po, for as long as na-share sa, magkakagrupo kayo, no? At lahat kayo ay may access dun sa link. Lahat kayo ay pwedeng mag-contribute dun sa Google Slides. So, hindi lang isang tao yung may control doon sa app. So, dun sa Google Slides, maganda na encourage natin yung collaboration among our students. Okay. And then spreadsheet. For example, sa economics, we want to teach our students on how to create demand schedule or supply schedule. We can actually make use of our spreadsheet. Okay. Or if we want to check on a certain trend, para makita natin siya o ma-present natin yung data using a graph or a map, then we can use spreadsheet in our class. Now, creative thinking skills is one of the essential skills that we must hone in our social studies classes. Okay? And under this category, there are several tools that has different functions. First, photos. They can make use of the camera available in their gadget. Okay? And then once they have taken a picture, they can incorporate some designs using the website Canva. Okay? Actually, a lot of teachers are using Canva to use appropriate designs for their presentations to make it more appealing to the students and motivating appealing to the students and to encourage them to participate well. Kasi yung mga graphics, animations na pwedeng incorporate. Pwede rin yung meme. Actually, meme can be used as a processing tool to know how well our students understand a particular concept or a particular issue in the society. Okay. Videos. They can make use of the screen recording function of their gadget. And then they can edit that using a movie maker app. And then audio. If you want to, let's say your one of your targets is to assess uh, oral skills, then you can make use of voice recorder. And then I mean the students can make use of voice recorder and then edit that using Audacity. So these are the creativity tools that they can use in our classes. Next is illustration. I think one of the best way that we can let our students organize data is through concept map. Okay, relating one concept to another, showing their relationship, direct or indirect relationship. We can use that through concept map. Okay, so they can do that using Padlet, because Padlet has different options. There's wall, stream, what else? They can actually select different styles or functions in Padlet that you think or the students think will work for them or appropriate for their task. They can also make use of the website called Mindly, okay, and slides or PowerPoint, because like I said, it allows collaboration among our students, and they can make use of the symbols and clip arts in slides and PowerPoint. Next, collaborative boards, because for example Padlet, for example you have an issue presented in class, create and contemporary issues for example, and you want them to react on it with justification, then you can post a prompt in Padlet, and then our students can create their own post as their response to that prompt or to that question. Okay, or you can also make use of Google Docs or slides, or if you do not have a Google account, you can make use of Facebook group page. You can utilize whatever social media platform is available with you. Okay, and that in a way makes our lesson or learning plan flexible already. Okay, next is portfolio. A lot of us would require our students to compile their work and then synthesize it towards the end to know how much they learn in a particular unit. So if we want, we can do that through interactive presentations. So for example, in PowerPoint or in Keynote, each slides, for example, is dedicated to a particular output. And then the last slide will be the synthesis of all their output. For example, in history, one slide for each personality in history or for each event, their connections, and then synthesis in the end. They can do that, okay? Or through worksheets by using Word, Pages, or Docs, okay? Or they can also use or make an actual website by using WordPress or Google Sites or Facebook page, okay? To be able to compile all their work, to curate it, organize it, depending on the guide questions or the essential questions that we will give them. So it's very important that whenever we give assessment like this, there is a driving question or an essential question that will thread all these outputs into one. Okay, so that's what portfolio in social studies should look like. Now, classroom response system. During video conferences like this, we can have actually real-time presentation. Because actually, one of the key things that we should remember is that whenever we give lecture, let us make an effort to make it interactive. You can actually make use of Peer Deck, a website wherein you can upload your presentation there and incorporate questions so that there's a break in between your presentations so that your students can interact with you. And then you can also gamify your activities, and this is actually one of the favorite activities of our students. Okay, they like it when we incorporate or when we gamify their activities, and we usually use Kahoot or Quiz for this, or Mentimeter. Mentimeter, we use this for word collage. Okay, so that our students, for example, let's say we want to ask them a word that would describe a particular event. For example, World War One or World War Two. as an introductory activity, then you can make use of Mentimeter. Okay, you can still use flashcard. If in the traditional way, we write it in a cardboard and we flash it to the students. Right now, I can already make use of Quizlet or Keynote or PowerPoint presentation to present these words to our class. And then audio-visual tools like listening tools like podcasts or videos in YouTube. Actually, for example, in my case, I'm teaching world history and particularly World War One and World War Two, to incorporate primary sources in my activities to teach them historical thinking skills. For example, empathy, historical empathy. Okay, to know the perspective of the person in the past using the available data and information. We use podcast because there are already available podcasts describing the letters or the journals of the people involved in the war, like the soldiers themselves or the generals. Okay, so we can utilize that in our history class. Or if we want them to react on a particular social issue or political issue, and then you don't want to read that much in your class, then you can ask them to record their voice as they react on a particular issue and as they justify that issue. Okay? They can also make use of websites such as YouTube. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, this is one of the most commonly used website in online learning, YouTube, because there are actually a lot of videos available. And I commend my fellow AP or social studies teachers who are exerting an effort to share their own resources online so that other teachers can make use of them. So maraming salamat po sa inyong generosity at sinishare po ninyo yung mga kaalaman ninyo, talento ninyo at kakayahan sa YouTube. Okay? You can also make use of Edpuzzle because in Edpuzzle, you can incorporate YouTube videos, your selection of YouTube videos, and then there's a break, you can pause it, and for each pause, you can incorporate a question or a note para hindi naman dire-diretso yung pinanonood ng students natin. So pwedeng after some time biglang may pause para may questions sila halimbawa na sasagutin or may notes sila na kailangan i-take down notes nila or i-write down nila. And then finally, reading and research tools because our subject would require a lot of readings from our students. That's why they can explore different websites that offer free journals, okay, like online libraries such as Philippine eLive or open access journal databases such as Philippine eJournals. Or they can maximize reliable search engines such as Google Scholar, Kindle, or kids search depending on the level of difficulty that you want of the activity that you want your students to accomplish, or the most commonly used search engine, Google. Yun nga lang, let us teach our students on how to use them properly. Okay, and that's gonna be another talk if ever. Okay, so these are some of the suggested apps according to the work of Almario in Austria as we prepare our assessments or our learning plan in general for social studies. Now, based on my experience and what we do in our team in Xavier, here are some of the suggested websites that you can visit in your history, economics, and contemporary issues class. For history, most especially for teachers teaching Asian studies and world history, you can make use of history.com or tothco.com or ancient.eu or nationalgeographic.com. Okay, but I highly encourage you to incorporate primary sources in your activities or in your resources. Para hindi lang puro basic information about a particular event ang alam ng mga students natin. Para at least nabibigyan pa rin natin ng pagkakataon sila na mapalalim pa yung nalalaman nila in a particular historical event or in an important historical figure. Okay. And since Philippine history is not officially included in the high school social studies curriculum, still it's very important we incorporate the discussion of Philippine history in our Asian studies and world history classes. That's why we can still make use or utilize of whatever resources is available in the NHCP website or the National Historical Commission of the Philippines website. Okay. Now, for economics and contemporary issues, there are actually a lot of websites available where you can look for information that you can use in your class. Now, for your website, the most trusted ones are the websites that have domains such as .edu, .gov, and .org. When you see in the URL, in the website link, .edu, that means the website that website is a website of an educational institution. And most of the time, they are more reliable because they make research. They produce this information based on the research work. That's why they are more reliable compared to other websites in which most of the time the authors are unidentified. Or .gov, because that means the website is a website of a government agency or a government office. And finally, .org. .org would mean a website of a non-government organization or any private company or institution for a particular cause or for a particular issue or topic, and you can make use of that. Okay. And then for issues, since there are several issues now incorporated in news being shared in social media platforms, you can go directly to the news and current affairs page or website of the news or television shows that you watch. Okay. But make sure before you copy them or before you share them, you first verify the authenticity, okay, of the page or the website. Because sometimes there are fake accounts. They just copy the logo and then they create their own document, their own articles. And sometimes people would be confused about them. And worse, they would share sources that are not true, that are fake. Okay, so it's very important that when selecting materials, we verify them first before we let our students use them in our social studies class. So that's just a word of caution, fellow teachers. Now, the challenge with regards to efficient and effective technology integration would always be about the internet, because internet now, I've seen a meme that actually internet is already, according to that meme, is already part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Okay, although that's not true in Maslow's actual hierarchy, actual theory. Internet, we cannot deny the fact that internet is actually part of our basic needs, especially that most of us are now are called digital natives or digital citizens. So it's very important that we have stable source of internet connection. But let's say our students would find it very challenging, I mean, to work on our tasks because of their unstable internet connection, then perhaps you can just be more lenient with your time allotment so that you can give them more time to work on their activities or assessments, and then give more time to accomplish them to process these activities. Okay. Now, I've mentioned different tools. The key here is, I mean, my fellow teachers, the key point here is to select the materials, websites, or tools carefully. Okay. Do not overwhelm yourself or your students in using these tools or websites. Don't use all of them all at the same time or in one module to impress anyone. Okay? Our focus should always be our objective. What do we want our students to learn? And what do we think would be the best website or the best tool that we can use to be able to teach that to our students? So that should always be what we have in mind. Okay? And it would be better if we would provide our students with the direct link to the material so that they can work on it asynchronously. Para hindi na po nila tayo kukulitin na alin mismo dun sa website, alin article yung mismo kailangan nilang basahin. By the way, when you look for the articles or for website, minsan ang daming laman po, di ba? Hindi naman kailangang ipabasa natin sa kanilang lahat yon. Pwede naman po nating ilagay sa instructions natin na meron lang certain paragraph sila na kailangan basahin, tapos yun lang yung pagtutuunan nyo ng pansin sa discussion or sa activity. Or pwede naman na we have a certain questions, guide questions, tapos masasagot yun based on a certain paragraph na binasa po nila. Para naman hindi rin po tayo ma-overwhelm kapag nag-check na tayo. At most importantly, yung mga students kapag ginagawa na nila. Okay? And also, this is something that most of us as social studies teachers are guilty of, relying too much on textbooks na para ginagawa na nating Bible yung textbooks. Okay? So let us not rely heavily on textbooks. As much as possible, we encourage you to go directly to the original source of the information. To be honest, in Xavier School, we do not use any textbooks in our social studies class because we encourage research skills to our students, and we want them to explore as much resources as they want to search them or to use them for whatever purpose, but most especially in our social studies class, para mas marami para mas ma-expose sila sa iba't ibang information. For example, some student would rely on using Wikipedia, even teachers in preparing their lessons. Actually, Wikipedia is um, hindi naman siya completely unreliable. Okay, we can still learn a thing or two from Wikipedia, pero it would be better if we verify the information written in the Wikipedia page from a more credible source. Pwede namang idea lang yung kukunin natin from Wikipedia, but yung mismong content or yung mismong information manggagaling kung saan yung mismong source ng information. Kaya maganda rin na tinitingnan natin yung bottom page ng Wikipedia page kasi nandoon nakalagay karamihan ng mga hyperlink kung saan na derive or nakuha yung mga nakalagay doon sa Wikipedia page. So that's very important, teachers. Effective and efficient technology integration. Now, I mentioned a while ago that one of our burden in social studies being a multidisciplinary subject is the number of topics that we need to teach to our students. Okay, but if I were to ask you, which for you is more important? The breadth of the content, I mean the range of the topics that you should teach to your students, or the depth of your discussions or the skills that you want to teach them. So what do you want for your class? What kind of learning do you want them to have or to acquire in your class? Okay, that will lead me to my third insight, which is about developing critical thinking and communication skills. Okay, let us veer away from assessing or asking our students about a certain personality, event, dates, places, and social studies. Matagal na pong nating dapat na iniwan na yon. Hindi yun dapat ang focus natin sa ating klase. But rather, our focus should be, our activities should provide an opportunity for our students to examine data and sources or analyze current issues and construct personal argument about these issues with sufficient justification. Kailangan critical thinkers na yung inuhon natin ng mga students. Kasi actually, yun yung kailangan natin ngayon, lalo na't marami tayong issue na kinakaharap in this time of pandemic. Hindi lang sila basta dapat recipient ng knowledge, kundi dapat pinoproseso nila yun at binibigay nila yung sarili nila ng take mula doon sa mga information na nakukuha nila. And it's very important na hindi lang siya nangyayari sa isip, kundi alam din nila i-communicate yung mga ideas na yan so that they can share them effectively. In Xavier School, we utilize the discussion board feature of Schoology. And this is what a discussion board in Schoology looks like. It's a page where we can post the general guidelines. It's very specific, okay, including the time allotment and then the discussion prompt. It's very important that the prompt or the question is easy to understand. And also the rubric. It must be there so that the students would know how you will grade them or how you will grade their work. And then, just like a Facebook post or page, The students can post in the comment box their opinion and elaborate on it, substantiate it, and then their classmates can react to their classmates' post. They can either like it or make a reply. But we require them to reply actually if they agree or disagree or if they want to offer a new argument about that certain position. So that's how online interaction goes. For example, in contemporary issues or also in other subject matter in social studies, economics, or history, for example. Okay. But the challenge here is student engagement. That is why I advise that you include this as one of your assessments, major assessments, because after all, you are checking or assessing their communication skills and also their critical thinking skills. Just make sure that when you are incorporating this in your own context, or I mean, based on your own context, or in creating your own learning plan, make sure that instructions are clear, the prompt is easy to understand, and there is an available rubric. Okay, and then, like I said, if you do not have access to learning management system like Schoology or Google Classroom, you can make use of social media platforms like Facebook. Since a lot of them are very much into it, ang haba ng oras na ginugugol nila sa paggamit ng Facebook, why not turn it to something educational, something that would yield them significant results tulad ng critical thinking and communication skills. So, pwedeng ibigay natin sa kanila yung ganong klase ng opportunity. Tsaka hindi lang ito basta alam mo yung information about a specific event, kundi may sarili kang opinion about it and you justify it. Okay? Now, another important question. Do you allow your students to collaborate in accomplishing tasks in your social studies class? Or most of your activities are to be accomplished individually? Actually, allowing them to collaborate is a very important aspect that we must harness to our students in this kind of setup. Because collaboration is actually one of the 21st century skills that the K-12 curriculum targets to achieve. Okay, so we should allow that to happen in our social studies classes because when they collaborate on a particular activity, in the process, they are learning the skill of negotiating and collaborative decision making. Kasi ang dami nila, for example, ginrupo niyo po sila at may output sila na kailangan gawin. For example, there's a particular issue, political issue for example, and each group may kanya-kanyang question. Siyempre sila, may kanya-kanya silang opinion sa grupo nila. So pwedeng mag-negotiate sila na ito na lang yung opinion na palabasin natin sa presentation natin kasi ito yung dominant na opinion sa grupo natin at ito yung kaya nating i-justify. So they can negotiate these ideas and collaborate in justifying them. Actually, in Xavier, since like I said, we use Zoom, we utilize the Zoom breakout rooms to give them a way to collaborate in these particular activities or G Suite tools. Kasi basta meron kang link at pare-pareho kayong may Gmail account, you can already edit the same file. So pwede ka nang, as a teacher, pwede ka nang ikaw ang mag-create ng Google Slides, make copy for each group, para at least link na lang ang ibibigay mo for each student. At nakikita mo kung may nangyayari ba dun sa presentation nila before pa nila isubmit. Okay? And you can incorporate that well in your Google Classroom. Kasi sa Google Classroom, you can make a copy. Let's say, meron ka lang isang draft ng worksheet, you can already make a copy of that for each of your students. So you can maximize that in your class. Again, interconnection would be the most pressing challenge in this kind of setup, and also student engagement. That's why it's very important, let's say, breakout rooms na binibisita po talaga natin yung mga breakout rooms para nakikita natin if how well our students are engaged during group tasks or in accomplishing group activities. Okay? So like I said, you can utilize G Suite tools or even social media platforms. You can create a Facebook page or pwede rin sa Messenger. yung pwede kang gumawa ng sarili mong GC for a particular topic. Pero kung ayaw mo namang ma-overwhelm, pwede na lang sa Facebook group page. Okay? Yun lang. In allotting time, let's be considerate para at least mas marami silang oras to work on it. Now, finally, how do you assess learning in social studies online? Kayo pa rin po ba yung tipo ng AP teachers na nagpapa-quiz online? Or kayo po ba yung nagpapa-essay? Or kayo yung mahilig po magpa-project? Tapos ang tanong po doon, paano po natin chine-check yung integrity ng output ng mga students? Paano po natin nalalaman malalaman kung student po ba talaga natin yung nag-accomplish yung mga outputs na yon at hindi ibang tao like their parents. Kasi mako-compromise naman yung learning nila if we let other people work on it. Kasi kahit na anong paalala natin that it's supposedly the students, kung hindi naman sila magiging honest about it, how would we know? Okay? So we just give them the benefit of the doubt. Now, it's very important now to design authentic assessments in social studies. Okay, let us try to veer away from giving them long tests or other pen and paper tests. Because first, the question would be about the integrity of the student output. Kahit pa test yan, gumamit tayo for example ng Google form para kita agad natin yung score. Pwede yan as formative assessment. Pero bilang major assessment or a summative assessment na magiging basis ng grade nila, I would suggest that you go with authentic assessments. And we actually do that in Xavier School. That's why for every authentic assessments that we design, we always have grasps and rubrics. For those who are familiar with UBD by Wiggins and Mactay, they are the proponents of grasps. That means goal, role, audience, situation, product, and standards para ma-describe natin ng maayos yung assessments. And we always prepare that in Xavier. And sa amin, less pen and paper assessments pagdating sa social studies. Okay? So when thinking of authentic assessments, siguro we're wondering anong klase ng authentic assessment ang ibibigay namin sa student? How will we know? Actually, pwede kayo magpagawa ng assessment sa kanila na ang observation or yung context na pagbabatayan would be their home, would be their family. So for example, ang tinuturo po natin or ang gusto po nating i-check or i-assess yung kanilang communication skills and research skills. So pwedeng i-observe nila kung ano yung responses ng tao or how people behave in this time of pandemic in their immediate community or at home. Okay, ano yung mga policies na meron, ano yung mga policies na sa palagay nila ay dapat gawin ng gobyerno or implement ng LGU nila. Or pwedeng social media engagement. Pwedeng magpa-react tayo about a social media post and then may rubric tayo on how they should react about it. Or pwede namang they create an advocacy webpage about a particular issue, or a particular cause in contemporary issues. So we can make use of that to prepare authentic assessments for our students. Ang importante lang po dito, kailangan properly scaffolded siya. Hindi siya dapat one shot, big shot na isang upuan gagawin ng students kasi talagang mahirapan po sila ng ganun. So dapat mag-incorporate tayo ng schedule. For example, yung isang big assessments, meron siyang subparts. No? May part A, part B, part C. So pwedeng week na to, part A lang muna. Following week, part B, following week, and then the next week, part C naman hanggang unti-unti nilang matapos para at least natatrack din natin yung progress nila at nakikita natin kung talagang ginagawa nila. And then in a video conference like this, pwedeng may part yon na gagawin nila during video conference like this para at least nakikita niyo pa rin sila sa screen that they are working on it. Although I understand it's really challenging if you have like a lot of students in one class. Minsan talaga ang daming estudyante sa public school, like more than 50 if I'm not mistaken, diba? So talagang challenging po yun. That's why it's very important that we build good relationship with their parents. Kasi yung mga parents sa totoo lang, ang dapat katulong po natin sa pagtuturo sa mga estudyante. Not really pagtuturo, no? But more on pagbabantay sa mga mag-aaral kung paano nila chine-check yung mga gagawin ng estudyante natin. Pwede nga bigyan natin sila ng checklist na, ma'am or sir, wag nyo pong wag po kayo ang gagawa, but rather, i-check nyo lang po kung nagawa na nila itong mga sumusunod. So may checklist lang sila na titingnan ng mga dapat ma-accomplish ng mga students. So that's how you can design authentic assessments for the students. Okay. So basically, what are these insights trying to tell us? There are several ways to deliver instruction and also assessments in social studies in this time of pandemic. And all the more that in technology integration is important, since it is only through technology that we can still connect with one another. But still, at the end of the day, what we want to achieve is to hone our students to become somebody like this. As described by DepEd Aralin Panlipunan Curriculum, ang mga mag-aaral po natin ay dapat maging humapanuri, humapagnilay, mapanagutan, produktibo, makakalikasan, makabansa at makatao na may pambansa at pandaigdigang pananaw at pagpapahalaga sa mga usapin sa lipunan, sa nakaraan, sa kasalukuyan at sa hinaharap. So sa tuwing may ginagawa po tayo o pine-prepare tayo na instructional materials or assessments, isipin po natin, ito pang gagawin nilang ito ay somehow makakatulong sila para maging ganito sila balang araw? May matututunan ba silang skill na mag-lead sa kanila para maging ganito? Dahil sa totoo lang po, it's a heavy burden placed on our shoulders as social studies teachers to hone our students to become a proactive or to become a better citizens of the respective communities in the future. Okay? At magagawa lang natin po ito sa pagtutulong-tulong. Sa totoo lang, hindi lang naman ito responsibilidad ng guro. Responsibilidad po ito ng lahat ng sektor sa ating lipunan. Magmumula yan sa kanilang tahanan, sa kanilang pamilya. Tayo yung magpapakita sa kanilang ng daan. Pero yung magagabay sa kanila, sa kanya-kanilang mga tahanan ay ang kanilang mga magulang. At dapat may suporta tayo mula sa gobyerno at mula sa mga pribadong sektor. Tulong-tulong po tayo dito. Dapat po bayanihan tayo sa pagtuturo sa mga mag-aaral natin, lalo na sa araling panlipunan. And finally, I would want to end my presentation with this conclusion. Teachers, don't worry. There's no absolute or single practice that you can employ in teaching social studies in this time of pandemic. You have a lot of options. What's important right now is to make ourselves flexible, open-minded, and empathetic in designing learning plans on modules so we can cater the different needs and context of our students. And whatever we are learning or realizing in our experience right now, let us bank on it para later on makadevelop tayo ng disruption-free curriculum. Kasi yun naman po dapat ang maging target natin at the end of all this. Kumbaga, binigyan lang tayo ng opportunity ng COVID-19 pandemic para mag-rethink. Okay? Itingnan natin yung ginagawa natin, yung mga practices natin. Para in the end, makadevelop tayo ng isang curriculum, ng isang way na kahit ano pang disruption ang mangyari, tuloy-tuloy pa rin po ang pag-aaral ng ating mga mag-aaral o mga estudyante. And with that, I would like to thank everyone for being patient and listening to my presentation. I'm sorry kung medyo napahaba, pero I'm hoping that you're able to learn or realize a thing or two that you can adapt to your own context. Maraming salamat po. At lahat po tayo ay magkakaagapay sa pagtuturo ng Araling Panlipunan. Maraming salamat po. Pagpalain po kayo. Bye-bye.